Reality behaves like a decision until observed. Let that sit in your mind for a second. Not because your eyeballs are magical, not because the universe is waiting for you to wink at it, but because at the deepest known layer of physics, reality does not always behave like the solid, predictable billiard ball universe your common sense was promised as a child. No, down there, where electrons dance, where particles behave like waves, where possibility itself seems to wear a lab coat, reality starts acting strange. It starts acting like a world of probabilities. And if that sounds suspiciously close to how faith operates, welcome. You're not crazy. You're just standing at the edge of one of the most fascinating cliffs in human thought. Tonight, we go down that cliff, carefully. We are going to talk about quantum mechanics. We are going to talk about faith. And we are going to answer a dangerous question. Why does faith seem to work in a world that often looks uncertain until the moment of decision? And no, we are not going to abuse physics to baptize superstition. We are going to keep the science honest, the theology sharp, and the story alive. Because the truth doesn't need fake miracles. The truth is already wild enough. Define quantum in 20 seconds. So what is quantum in plain English? Quantum mechanics is the physics of very small things, atoms, electrons, photons, the microscopic machinery under the floorboards of the universe. In that world, systems can exist in superpositions, meaning the math can describe multiple possible outcomes at once until measurement yields a definite result. Standard quantum theory predicts outcomes probabilistically, not always as a single pre-written script. That means before measurement, a particle can be described as a spread of possibilities. Not here in the ordinary sense, not there in the ordinary sense, but in a state where the theory gives you probabilities for what you'll get when you measure. And once measured, you get a result. One result, a definite outcome, a hard answer from a soft cloud of possibility. That is the simplified doorway into the mystery. And yes, physicists hear bad pop science explanations of this every day and age 5 years per sentence. The strange behavior. Now, here's where the story gets weird. In the classical world, the world of footballs, frying pans, and unpaid invoices, you expect things to have definite properties, whether you look or not. But in quantum theory, the act of measurement is not just a passive glance. It is bound up with the outcome you can actually report. In many standard descriptions, measurement or other disturbance destroys a superposition and yields a single observed state. The theory then assigns probabilities for which outcome appears. The unresolved question of how exactly that definite result emerges is part of the famous measurement problem. That does not mean consciousness creates the universe like a wizard with Wi-Fi. It means the physical setup, the interaction, the measurement context, those matter deeply. The scientific issue is not mind over matter in the simplistic sense. It is that quantum mechanics links observable properties to measurement arrangements in a way that challenged classical assumptions from the start. So imagine this. You're looking at reality, expecting a brick wall, but quantum physics hands you fog with statistics. Not chaos, not nonsense, not anything goes. Probability. Structured uncertainty. A lawful mystery. And suddenly, the universe is not a dead machine. It is more like a score waiting to be performed. The notes are real, the rules are real, but the exact herd event, that emerges in the act. That, my friend, is where people get tempted to run straight from the laboratory to the prayer closet while screaming, "I knew it!" Easy. Slow down. Put the tambourine down for 1 second.
Because now we need to define faith. Faith is not pretending. Faith is not denial. Faith is not, I refuse to look at reality because I prefer vibes. Biblically, faith is trust in what God has said, trust that acts. It is allegiance, confidence rooted in God's character, a choice to move before the visible outcome arrives. Faith is not fantasy. Faith is obedience under uncertainty. And that matters because many people treat faith like spiritual gambling. They say, if I want it hard enough, if I imagine it bright enough, if I shout it loud enough, reality must obey me. That is not faith. That is wishful thinking wearing church clothes. Faith is coming into agreement with the King and acting under His word. That is why faith can look bold without being delusional, because it is not confidence in your imagination, it is confidence in divine authority. So where does quantum reality help us think? Not as proof, as a mirror. Quantum mechanics tells us that at the deepest physical level, probability is not merely a sign of human ignorance in the simplest textbook treatment. It is built into how the theory predicts measurement outcomes. Even the formalism is in large part a machine for assigning probabilities to what will be observed. That means this: the universe is not embarrassed by unseen structure. The universe is not offended by outcomes that emerge through lawful uncertainty. The universe already contains a grammar for not yet visible, but still real in the model. Now listen carefully. That is not the same as saying faith is quantum physics. It is not. Faith is relational and covenantal. Quantum mechanics is mathematical and physical. But the analogy is powerful. In quantum theory, not every possibility is actualized in the same observed way. In faith, not every imagined outcome is promised by God. In quantum theory, results come through defined interactions. In faith, results come through alignment with the will and authority of God. In quantum theory, probabilities are lawful, not random nonsense. In faith, trust is disciplined, not blind chaos. So if you've ever felt that living by faith means stepping into a fog, you are not weak. You are human. The deepest levels of the physical world already taught us something shocking. Certainty is not always the starting point of reality as we experience it. Sometimes the world gives you probabilities first, then the moment of manifestation. And every entrepreneur, every parent, every pioneer, every prophet knows what that feels like. You move before the full picture is visible. You act before the final outcome is in your hand. You sow before the harvest makes sense. That is not irrational. That is how meaningful action often works. Kingdom authority versus wishful thinking. Now let's sharpen the blade, because this is where many people get lost. They hear observer effect, measurement problem, and probability, and suddenly they start speaking to their bank account like they're negotiating with Schrodinger's cat. That is not kingdom authority. That is motivational theater. Kingdom authority is not using God as a vending machine. It is representing His rule. When Jesus spoke with authority, it was never the authority of ego. It was alignment, union, submission, commission. He did not say, I am visualizing intensely. He moved in the will of the Father. That is the line between faith and fantasy. Wishful thinking says, I want this, therefore it must happen. Kingdom faith says, God has spoken, therefore I will act. One is self-generated pressure, the other is delegated authority. One is trying to bully outcomes, the other is standing in covenant. And here is the secret that changes lives. Faith works not because it hacks physics like a cheat code, but because it changes the human being who acts. Faith creates endurance. Faith creates clarity. Faith creates obedience. Faith stabilizes attention. Faith turns a hesitant person into a committed one. And committed people do things half-believing people never do. They persist longer. They endure ambiguity better. They move with purpose. They keep planting when everyone else quits in the dry season. So yes, faith can produce visible outcomes in the world, but often not because particles obey your positive mood, rather because trust in God reorganizes your choices, your courage, your patience, and your willingness to act when proof is incomplete. And that is not less miraculous. That may be the miracle most people miss. The rabbit hole deepens. Think about this. A farmer plants into hidden soil.
A founder invests in a company before the market agrees. A mother prays over a child before she sees the turnaround. A believer forgives before the other person apologizes. A preacher speaks to dry bones before there is a sound. In each case, there is a gap between the unseen and the seen, between probability and manifestation, between promise and evidence. That gap is where weak hearts call it foolishness, but the strong call it faithfulness. And that gap is why this conversation matters so much. Because modern people were taught to worship what can be immediately measured. If it cannot be graphed now, they doubt it. If it cannot be touched now, they mock it. If it cannot be proven now, they dismiss it. Meanwhile, the same modern world has to admit that the most successful physical theory ever built includes real debates about what measurement itself means and how definite outcomes arise from the formalism. That should humble all of us. It should remind us that mystery is not the enemy of truth. Sometimes mystery is simply truth at a depth your instincts were not trained to handle. And if physics can force us to admit that reality is stranger than common sense, why is it so hard to believe that spiritual life also requires trust beyond immediate sight? Humor and grounding. Now, before anyone clips this video and says, "So you're telling me if I stare at my empty wallet long enough, it collapses into a Ferrari?" No. If that worked, every broke college student with Wi-Fi and an espresso machine would already own 3 yachts. This is not manifest your Lamborghini by quantum vibes. This is not bless your sandwich and expect it to become Bitcoin. This is deeper. The lesson is not that reality bows to your whims. The lesson is that visible certainty is not the only category that governs a real world. Some things are true before they are obvious. Some outcomes are shaped by disciplined action under uncertainty. And faith is the spiritual muscle that lets you move in that space without collapsing internally. The takeaway. So, does quantum reality prove faith? No, and we should be mature enough to say that. But does quantum reality give us a powerful framework for understanding why unseen does not mean unreal, why probability can precede manifestation, and why acting before full visibility is not automatically irrational? Yes, absolutely. The microscopic world has already shattered the myth that reality must always look solid before it can be real. Quantum theory's predictive core is probabilistic, and measurement forces the question of how a definite result appears. That doesn't settle theology, but it does demolish the lazy assumption that only the immediately visible deserves serious respect. And that is where faith steps in. Not as a denial of reality, but as a way of walking with God through a reality that often reveals itself in stages. Faith is not closing your eyes. Faith is keeping them fixed on the right authority when the outcome is not yet visible. Faith is not pretending the fog is not there.
Faith is moving because the King told you the road continues through it. And that is why faith actually works. Not because you are God, but because you can trust the one who is. Faith test this week. Here's your challenge. Faith test this week. Pick one area of your life where you've been waiting for perfect certainty before obeying God. One conversation, one act of generosity, one disciplined habit, one apology, one step you know is right, but you've delayed because the outcome is not guaranteed. Then do this. Pray clearly. Write down what you believe God is asking of you. Take one concrete action within 7 days. Watch what changes inside you and around you. Not because you're playing magic games with the universe, but because faith becomes real when it moves. And when it moves, life moves with it. If this video challenged your thinking, subscribe. If it sharpened your faith, share it with someone who confuses faith with fantasy. And if you want more videos where we explore the edge between deep truth, strange reality, and the kingdom of God, stay with me. Because the rabbit hole goes deeper, but there is a trail, and we're following it.